Hello, and thank you for listening to the Hilariously Unemployed podcast. I'm your host, Dana Duckworth, also known as the Big Speaker. My goal with this podcast is ultimately to get someone hired. I know all too well the impacts of unemployment and layoffs. My guest and I hope to provide insight and resources that will support someone in gaining their next opportunity. You can support the Hilariously Unemployed podcast and those who are impacted by unemployment by giving this podcast a 5-star review, sharing it with someone who's hiring, or someone who's hilariously unemployed. I hope that you enjoy the show and find some laughter throughout. Hello, and welcome back to the Hilariously Unemployed podcast. I am your host and the big speaker, Miss Dana Duckworth. I am so excited to be here with y'all on another Friday, although I am exhausted, y'all. Did you miss me? Hilarious, hello, and thank you for joining me in the live audience. And for those of you who will be listening on podcast platforms, thank you for all of your support always. So, I know why you're here, big speaker rant. Just kidding. You're here for my guest. But before we get that going, let me just tell you how I am feeling this week. I am exhausted. I literally just ran in the house about 20 minutes ago. I drove back from DC. I spent the week in DC with the National Apartment Association for their event called Advocate, where they advocate for different rules, legislation inside of the multifamily housing industry. I also had the great pleasure of being a speaker for a session at the Maryland Multifamily Housing Association on Thursday. So I left DC, drove an hour and a half to Maryland, spoke to them, met some amazing people while I was in that space, and then drove back to DC last night because I wanted to spend the last night with my girls. And guess what they did to me? They made me laugh so hard that now my throat is hurting. So if I don't have my usual smooth big speaker voice, you can blame them. I'm not going to call y'all out. I appreciate the belly laughs. I think I have additional abs now. Thank you so much for that good time. But I've had a great week. I've looked beautiful. If you haven't looked at my LinkedIn, the outfits, stunning, the makeup, flawless, and not just me. There were a lot of people that look really, really amazing. I love professional fashion. If I can put on a good suit, I'm happy. All right, y'all. So, what are we talking about this week? Well, people are still being laid off. People are still unemployed. And guess what? I'm still on my mission to get somebody hired through this podcast. So, I am bringing to you another guest for this episode 2 of season 2. I'm so happy to welcome Tabitha to the show. She is a friend of the Sydney Weber, and she was introduced to the show, I think, through Sydney and reached out and said, hey, I want to be on here. And I was so elated to hear that. She has 12 years of full cycle recruiting experience. She is a new mom and she has a wealth of knowledge and expertise that she can bring to the table. She's going to be providing you, of course, with some inside track on how to get selected by recruiters and how to get your next role. But she's also here to tell her very unfortunate, hilariously unemployed story. Tabitha, I'd like to welcome you to the show and introduce you to my crew. Say hello to the Hilarious.
Hello to everyone. Thanks so much for joining today.
Y'all show Tabitha some love with some of those reactions. Well, Tabitha, I said that you found out about the show through Sydney. Is that correct?
That is correct. So Sydney and I have worked together at 2 different orgs now, and she is definitely like super immersed in the multifamily space, which is, I'm sure, how she knows you. And then she told me, you absolutely need to follow Dana and you should be on her podcast. And I was like, okay, I'll do it.
Awesome. Well, I'm so thankful that you reached out. We had an amazing call, and your story is one that I am excited to share. Although we want to get you hired, I think that just hearing the journey and the storytelling is so important because I know for me, when I was laid off, the sense of community that I felt and hearing from people who were going through something similar really kind of helped me through my journey. So, first things first, Tabitha, how long have you been hilariously unemployed?
I have been hilariously unemployed officially since January 2nd. I actually found out on November 30th that my position would be eliminated. And my last company was gracious enough to let me stay on so that I could finish out my parental leave through the state since they laid me off while I was on parental leave.
The shade of it all. Oh my goodness. We're going to unpack that in just a minute. So, you found out in November, and your expiration date, as I like to call it, was January 2nd, correct?
Correct.
And how are you doing? Mental health check. How are you feeling? What are your vibes? How is your spirit today?
Today it's great because I live in the Seattle area and it's sunny out. So that is like always helpful for the mental health in the Pacific Northwest. But overall, it's definitely been a struggle. I think marrying the happiest time of my life, having a brand new baby girl with the scariest time of my life, I've actually never been unemployed before
Mhm.
this ever, has been kind of a wild ride and stressful and wonderful all in the same few months. So that's definitely been challenging.
Okay, well, let's go to the beginning and unpack it. How long have you been a recruiter, and what really sparked your passion for this line of work?
Yeah, so I've been a recruiter for about 12 years. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know a ton of recruiters who went to college knowing that they were going to be a recruiter or went their whole life saying, that's what I want to do when I grow up.
Hmm.
I think most of us fall into it, and that's exactly what happened to me. I had graduated college and was kind of looking for a new opportunity. My degree's in urban studies,
Hmm.
and I actually focused on like gang prevention and minority youth, which I think we'll dive a little bit deeper into my background. But it was, I went to University of Washington. It's a pretty writing heavy program, and I had seen a marketing role back in the day on Craigslist, and I
Nobody
posted
on
it.
this show has ever said Craigslist, Tabitha. We're gonna add that to the hilariously unemployed bingo card, because who even knew you were getting jobs back on Craigslist back in the day?
I know it's so weird too because I'm only 25. Who knew? Um, but yeah, so I called this number and I said, "Hey, you have a marketing role. I'm really interested." And she said, "You're not qualified." And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "No, you're not." And I said, "Yes, I am. It's an entry level marketing role. Here's my skills and experience." And she said, "No, you're still not.
Mm.
But I'm hiring for a recruiter and I'd love to have a conversation with you." And I had no idea what recruiting entailed. I had never I've seen it before. It was with a staffing company. I knew nothing about staffing.
Mhm.
And I decided, why not? Why not meet with them? And that started me on a journey. I was with the same staffing company for 7 years. And it was the one of the best roles I've ever had. Such a fun time in my life, and I learned so much. And what really made me passionate about the work once I started it is I started in light industrial staffing. So these are people back then making $9 or $10 an hour,
Mhm.
um, and just really the roles that we would give to them would sometimes change their lives. And I'll never forget, like, there was somebody that we had who had been incarcerated and had really struggled.
Mhm.
And one of our clients ended up hiring him on, and he came to the office and he said, "This is the first time in my life I'll be able to buy my kids Christmas."
Wow.
Yes. And so that kind of story has always, that story has always followed me.
Mhm.
And what I keep in mind every day when I do the work I do, because whether it's, a minimum wage job or a VP, like the work that I do really does change people's lives and people trust me to do
Mhm.
that for them. And I love that about recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely. You are changing people's lives when you give them that phone call and say, "Hey, you got the job," or "Let me help you prepare for this interview," and you're giving them the skills that they need to navigate this space and gain employment. You absolutely are. So, thank you for sharing that. And that's how your passion was formed. I know at one point you were doing some recruiting in the collegiate space. Could you tell us a little bit about that? No names are required.
Oh no, we're gonna talk about that, Dana.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess that was technically right after I graduated college. I was working at a college doing some college recruiting within the high schools.
Mhm.
It was a for-profit college, which
Mm.
now there's like a lot of lawsuits and all the things, and definitely was probably not on the up and up as far as their business practices, but how we recruited definitely was. And so I would go out into the high schools and
Mhm.
recruit students for college. And I guess that is kind of what started me on like the recruiting side of things, but I definitely didn't know like the corporate recruiting for jobs existed.
Yeah.
And I really, really love that work. And I actually, some of my closest friends I met doing that job that I'm still close with. One of them I'm going to see later today. So the impact that had was really fun as well.
So you were sending people to the diploma mill?
What I was. That's why we don't talk about it too much.
All right, we're gonna move on from that subject. Do your research. All right, you are such a good sport. So, Tabitha, let's get into your own very unique story. Can you share with the audience how your layoff happened and really the impact? I know you shared that being a new mom, you have all of these ups because, of course, you have the new love of your life, right? But also going through this difficult time of not having employment. What happened at the job, Tabitha? Tell us about it.
Okay, so you want me to start with kind of like the journey of the layoff?
Yes, give us a tea, girl.
Okay. So yeah, I think how I got into the role, I'll touch on that. Excuse me. So as I mentioned before, I started in like manufacturing and then found out that I had a knack for permanent placements. And then when it was time for me to kind of leave staffing, I'd been doing it a long time. It is a grind. I absolutely loved the company I worked for, but I worked a lot. And so I kind of thought, well, if I want a family, what would next steps look like? And that was that I wanted to go into corporate recruiting. And so I started looking to make a move out of staffing into corporate recruiting. And I found a job with a credit union. And actually, I see that my old boss who hired me is on this call. Shout out to Derek.
Hey,
And he hired me to be the manager of talent acquisition at a credit union. And I really enjoyed it. And then I got recruited to a different credit union to be the director of talent acquisition. And as much as I love like the community impact that credit unions had, I wouldn't say that they were like super cutting edge and definitely not fast paced, which is what I was used to in staffing. I knew I always wanted to get into tech, and so I was doing everything that I could to like get feelers out there to try to get a role in tech. And no one would hire me. Everyone's like, nope, you don't have experience recruiting in the SaaS space. We won't hire you.
Yeah.
And then I had another great boss. Her name was Nicole, who took a chance on me. And I started with a prop tech company. And then I got recruited to the company that I was most recently at, which was also like a real estate technology prop tech company. They had kind of gotten me to have a conversation with them because of their commitment to DEI. And that's really what brought me over there. I was pretty happy in my last role. And then they said, hey, we want recruiters who understand DEI. It was fun. It was exciting. So I headed over there and spent about 2 years there. While I was there, we did have a number of layoffs. So we had 3 rounds before I was affected. So when I started, like we had 4 recruiters and we got down to 2, just myself and my technical counterpart. And then I was on parental leave and I got a text from my boss that said, can you join the all hands tomorrow? And I replied, you're laying me off.
You already know if they're asking you to do any form of work or join any calls while you on parental leave, it is not great news.
No, not great news. Sure wasn't. And I actually had texted my technical counterpart and I said, am I getting laid off? And he goes, what do you mean? And it turns out we were both getting laid off and neither one of us really knew. I think both of us kind of saw it coming with that many layoffs. And also as recruiters, you can see the number of jobs you're working and you can tell there's not a lot of them. So it probably wasn't sustainable long term. And yeah, so I got laid off in our 4th round of layoffs. Both my technical counterpart and they basically eliminated the recruiting function completely.
Wow.
They did keep our senior director of talent acquisition and a couple other people got laid off. So he absorbed a couple jobs, as I understand, and is kind of their point person when they do open roles occasionally.
So you were there through several rounds before you were actually impacted. Similar to my story, I had saw a couple of rounds before it was my turn, and I was like, "Oh, I thought it was exempt. You're not." Um, Talk
Uh-huh.
to me about really the space, the morale, and the culture of the company by the time that you were laid off and making your exit.
Yeah, so you could feel it. It was heavy. And with every round, the conversation was really similar like, oh, we're retargeting the business. So this will make it so that we're profitable. We're sure this is it. We're sure this is it.
Hmm.
So by the third time, you're kind of like, are we really? They had also just won a really large government contract, but we're still kind of in negotiations about when it was supposed to kick off. Originally, I want to say it was supposed to kick off like last spring,
Hmm.
and then it got to summer, and then it was September, then it was December, and I got laid off end of November. So I still don't know if the partnership has officially kicked off and revenue is coming in from it or not. And I think we were all just kind of holding on to that as our lifeline. Like, okay, when this goes live, then
Yeah.
we'll be busy again. We'll be busy again. And I had seen the headcount plan, and there were a lot of hires in my portion of the business.
Hmm.
But it really all hinged on that, and it just never happened. And I think because of that, a lot of people had started to leave to find other opportunities. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't updated my resume and my LinkedIn.
Good job.
Um, Especially knowing like I'm a brand new mom. This was
Mhm.
my first baby. I waited a long time building my career to have a child, and the thought of not having an income
Yeah.
was and is very, very scary. And so I was doing everything I could to prevent that. And unfortunately was not
Not having an income and then also the loss of benefits as a new mom, that is heartbreaking.
able to.
How did you
Yeah.
navigate that?
Yeah. We were fortunate in the sense, like I said, they made my last day January 2nd. So I had benefits through the end of January.
Mhm.
And then they paid for Cobra for the month of February,
Okay.
which thank goodness, because who can afford it?
Right.
Um, and then I'm also really fortunate that I live in Washington State, and we have a really good state healthcare exchange. And so currently, because I don't have, well, I thought I didn't have an income, but then when I applied, they told me my unemployment isn't income.
Barely.
And luckily, my daughter still qualifies for benefits. I
Mhm.
do not to have them free. I have to go to the marketplace to buy them. And I think for myself, it will start next month that I'll be paying like $200 a month for my benefits, but luckily she is free. Um, so I'm really, really grateful for that because that I think was the scariest part. Like I can't go without benefits, and what's it going
Right.
to cost me to?
Shout out to Washington State for having that available to you. Okay, so I want to go back to the fact that you were on maternity leave. You were on parental leave. And I always thought that people who were on parental leave were not able to be I know they're not able to be terminated or laid off. Like, what is your knowledge around that? Well, obviously it can happen because it happened to you.
Yeah, it is legal. That's everybody's first question. Is that even legal? It is absolutely legal. It had actually happened to my colleague, another recruiter, a few months before it happened to me when she was on parental leave.
Wow.
Um, and basically, so the rules, the legality of it, I should say. So you can be laid off while you're on parental leave. You can't be laid off because you're on parental leave. So they can't say you had a baby, you're fired
Well,
or laid off. But what they can say is we've eliminated your position and
mhm.
you're now laid off.
Hmm.
And because they did eliminate the recruiting function, um, it was allowed.
Yeah. If because I know you said that there was some contract that was coming up and they would have all of this funding in the future. If in a perfect world they called you today and said, Tabitha, we were tripping. Come on back here. What would your answer be?
So that's a good question. I think yes, I would go back. I really enjoyed the people I worked with. I believed in the product and the team and the capabilities and capacities. I would be lying if I said that I wouldn't feel completely burned, that they would lay me off and then call me back. And also interesting, they've hired a lot of people from the company that I was with before them. So a lot of my previous colleagues are also there now, which I think would in some ways make it more compelling. But my feelings are still really hurt, and I don't take it personal because it's not like they cut only me, they cut myself and the other recruiter. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I would go back. I don't know that I would be able to do it with confidence unless I really, really understood the financials of it all and that this wouldn't be happening 3 months from now.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So you said you have a lot of colleagues from your previous organization, which I know you shared with me was acquired. So a lot of folks ended up where you were at that point. Because I know everybody stays connected to everyone. What are their, what they saying, girl? Are they worried? Are they stressed? Do they have that panic of tomorrow could be my day?
I think so. A lot of them actually came over even after I left because they had been acquired. Some of them stayed with that company for quite some time and then decided it wasn't a fit. It was a really big real estate technology company.
Okay.
So from going to startup to a huge company, a lot of them kind of trickled out leaving. But the few that were there before, yeah, I definitely know that they feel it. They say, how could you not be worried seeing 3 rounds of layoffs and I think the last one was 30% of the company that was left. Wow. So there's definitely, I think, worry. I think everybody's really hopeful because they do believe in the product that once all of this happens, it will pull them out of it. And I'm hopeful for them too because I don't want anyone to have to go through this ever.
Of course, of course. What is your position on the Open to Network banner? I noticed that you don't have yours on.
Do I not? It should be.
Oh, it may be on your page, but I can't see it in this space, so it may be. So you do have your Open to Network banner.
I know that there's all this controversy about it. I do have mine up because as a recruiter, there is on the back end of LinkedIn Recruiter, there is a search function where you can check people who are open to work.
Yeah.
And sometimes for searches, especially if a role needs to be filled really, really quickly, that's a good place to start because they don't have to put in notice usually. Right. Some people do it when they're working, but oftentimes it means they're ready to make a move really quickly. It's there. It's not a secret. I got laid off. There's nothing I can do about it. So I've kept it up there. I've seen people take it off. I know that there's oh, you're seen as less desirable and all of these things. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you read any of my posts, I'm laid off. It says on there that I'm not working. So to me, it's not a huge secret. And I think also for me, I do have a big network. And so having an open to work banner, I am hoping keeps me top of mind to my network so that when they see an opportunity, they're continuing to connect me and send them to me.
Oh, I am pro Open to Network banner. The only issue I have is the colors. We don't have options. The green can clash with my profile photo. So LinkedIn, if you are listening, give the girls options for the Open to Network banner. Now, I want to go back to something that you shared about DEI being such a huge selling point for you when you were vetting this organization and deciding if you wanted to make the move. What were some of the things that they were doing in regards to DEI? And then why was that something that really influenced your decision to go with them?
Yes. So some of the things they were doing, one, just targeting recruiters who had experience recruiting DEI. I think that spoke volumes. We want people who know this and care about this. But they were doing some other really cool things. So the first 2 weeks of every search, any outbound recruiting done by us recruiters and the team had to be to candidates from underrepresented groups.
Okay.
So that was a big one. We had our OKRs. Some of the company OKRs were tied to diversity metrics. And then just general conversations. Like it was okay to really openly talk about, like, okay, on this team, here's the URGs that might be missing, and how could we target them, and where could we look for them. So just be able to have really open conversations, because that doesn't always happen in orgs, and I think especially in tech, that's definitely something that is not always on the forefront of people's minds, and it's definitely not always represented in the teams that they have.
There are definitely a lot of URMs in the tech space. The tech space has a very distinct look, and it is not always very diverse. So tell me a little bit about your background. I know you say your degree is in urban studies, but we're
Yeah.
connected on some other things in regards to our upbringing that I would like for us to unpack together.
Yeah, and I'm pretty open about this. So I see, like, I have a cousin on here, my old boss, another friend. I know that they all know this about me because I'm very, very transparent. So my degree is in urban studies, and I focused on gang prevention and minority youth. And kind of what led me to that is that, so my mom is Latina and my dad is white. And my mom was actually an addict when I was a kid. So she was gone pretty young in my life, about 8 months. And my dad had full custody of me with my stepmom, and they ended up raising me.
Okay.
But I would see my mom from time to time. I knew she was an addict. Oftentimes she didn't have a car or a phone, or would forget to pick me up, or all the things that come with that as a child. And then in my 20s, she was actually arrested and incarcerated for about 8.5 years in a federal prison. And so during all of that happening, I remember growing up and kind of looking at my dad's side of the family and looking at my mom's side of the family, and physically they looked different. Their skin was different colors, and thinking, why do I have opportunities and they don't? I had cousins who were in gangs, on drugs, in prison. And it was just kind of one of those things that from a really young age, I always questioned everything anyways, but I thought, what's different about me? And really started as I got older to understand what it's like, for minorities in this country. And I can't say that I fully identify. I shared this with you, Dana. I don't identify as a woman of color, because you can all see my picture. I am not very dark at all. I know that I present as white, but I do identify as Latina. And kind of seeing both worlds really had me questioning, like, why is the world built the way it is, and what can I do to make an impact on that? And that's what kind of led me down, like, the DEI path and started that journey for me. And then how it's kind of come to fruition now is that when I am recruiting, I really recruit through a very diverse lens. So I try to bring as many women, people of color, veterans, LGBTQIA+, people with disabilities to the companies that I work at. And I also try to advocate for those people to get paid equally, because that's a big disconnect with oftentimes, especially women and women of color, not asking for enough when they're negotiating or discussing salaries.
Absolutely.
So that's what showed up for me today.
Somebody just asked me and my Black friends to do something for $150. The answer is no. We don't speak for that amount. Like, we are.
Absolutely not. No, like, have you seen gas prices?
We don't do that. Pay us what we are worth, because we bring value to your organization. So you shared that your mom was an addict, and we really connected because I haven't talked about this on the show, but my father was an addict. Ooh, my story is my father was actually a pastor. So I was a preacher's kid for a long time. When I grew up. I know I don't act like it, y'all. Calm down, and I don't want to hear it in the comments later. But my father was drug addicted. He was a veteran. He was also suffering from bipolar disorder. for a long time, but undiagnosed. He passed several years ago, but I I don't know that I've ever talked about that in a professional space. And I don't think a lot of people who are the kids of drug addicted parents and have thrived and somehow been able to make different impacts in the world. I think I bring a lot of authenticity and transparency everywhere I go, but I don't talk about that piece. So, in speaking to you about it and how open you are about your mother and her past struggles, I think that helped me unlock another piece of transparency in my life.
I love that. That means a lot to me. And I think that's part of why I do it. I used to be so embarrassed to tell people, like, what are they going to think? And
Mhm.
will they judge me and think that I'm on drugs or like that I'm not intelligent? And then as I started to meet more people who found out about my story, they were like, wow. And so many people have a parent who's been addicted or incarcerated. Like, so many people. And so it got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to be open about my story. I want people to feel psychologically safe with me at the organizations that I work at.
Mhm.
And so I do a lot of things to create that psychological safety. And that's part of it, is just being really open about where I came from. And those are questions that come up in conversation, right? So, like having a daughter, people are like, well, do your parents live close?
Yeah.
Are you close to your mom? Is she going to be in the delivery room with
Yeah.
you? Right. And so I was working harder to avoid those conversations
Mhm.
when it's easier to just be really transparent about, like, this is who I am and these were my struggles, and this is kind of what led me to where I am today. And I've had so many people feel really safe with me, whether that be, I have friends who are LGBTQIA plus who
Mhm.
are like, oh, they then feel comfortable sharing that their partner is the same sex as them,
Yeah.
or we'll have friends who said, yeah, my parents were an addict. I have another girlfriend that was like, actually, my parents were incarcerated.
Yeah.
And I think it just allows people to just show up so authentically when we're really open about what led us to where we
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I thank you for helping me with that. My path through it has always been humor. I feel like, y'all, I ain't got no daddy. Well, I had one, but he was on drugs. So he was not around for most of my life. So that is something that I have been, I think, unpacking more so now that I'm an adult woman because it definitely impacts relationships in the way that you are able to build relationships. So thank you, Tabitha. You changed something for me when you shared your story. So keep sharing that story with other people.
Of course. And I do want to say also, my mom is doing very well now.
Yes, she
We
is.
have a relationship. She's actually here today babysitting my daughter so that we wouldn't have distractions. She's also a veteran and didn't have resources before she was incarcerated because she hadn't gone to war or anything like that, but was given resources through the VA because of her incarceration.
Hmm.
And she's now doing really well. She's an HVAC tech, actually on a military base. So
Okay,
she's
girl.
got it. They're doing awesome. We're rebuilding. So, yeah, I want to share that too for her sake.
I love that. I love that you all are connected and she is doing so well and thriving. And now she has the opportunity with your daughter to do some of the things that I'm sure she wishes that she was capable of doing during your childhood.
Yeah, yeah. I hope she sees it that way for sure.
Yeah. So back to recruiting and talking about the DEI lens, and really just getting people jobs, people in general. It is rough out here. What strategies and initiatives have you or do you think organizations should implement to really support diversity efforts when it comes to the professional space?
Yeah, I think one, just having the conversation, understanding that it's important, right? The kind of what everyone says is, oh, we just want the most qualified candidate. And my
Hmm.
response to that is always, yeah, me too. And those aren't mutually exclusive.
Hmm.
So, how do we do that? And it's been proven time and time again. All of the research shows that the more diverse a company is, the more profitable they are. So, companies are missing out on the thing they care about most, which is financial gain,
Absolutely.
by being diverse. And so I think some of it is one, just having conversations, recognizing like, oh, we might be very white, we might be very male dominated. How do we change that? And then actively seeking out candidates that might not be in their network. That's a big thing, especially in tech. Everybody has referrals for every role that you open. And so oftentimes you get a lot of people that look and think alike from those referrals. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for referrals. Every interview that I've had so far has been from a referral. But it can be a detriment when you're truly trying to build like DEI within your org if your org is not already diverse. So I think that that's a big thing. And then, yeah, figuring out. So I was at a TA networking or a TA conference last month before, and somebody shared a partner diversity network PDF with me. That's a ton of orgs that have diverse candidates that you can partner with. So starting to create those partnerships, I think, is really important, but not just having the partnership like, oh, you know, we have a partnership with the Black engineers. It's what are we doing to help them? So I heard one of the speakers say that he volunteers with these orgs like once a month. He'll do an hour of like resume writing services for them and different things like that, so that it really is mutually beneficial, so that us as a company, we're not just coming in and like trying to poach diverse candidates. So I think that that's another thing that we can do. But a lot of it is truly just like, are we having the conversation? Are we realizing that we aren't diverse and trying to come up with solutions tied to business outcomes to solve for that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And organizations who are listening, diversity, equity, and inclusion will make your organization better. This is something that I speak about when I am booked and busy doing my thing. I talk to organizations about the fact that we know that DEI is important. Well, I do. But for a lot of businesses, you almost have to make the business case for them by showing them that this is going to make you more profitable. This will make you more innovative. This will allow you all to make decisions more strategically because you are bringing so many different opinions and ideas to the table. Now, let's go back to your personal story and your personal job search. What have been the challenges that you've encountered while you're trying to navigate this space?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is just that I'm a recruiter in tech. And we are getting laid off in mass currently. I saw somebody was on here earlier. I think she's dropped now, but she was just laid off yesterday. And it was, she was a recruiter at like my target dream company. And her and I also know each other professionally. And so I was really bummed to see that, because that definitely means they're not adding a recruiter anytime soon. But yeah, I think that is honestly the biggest challenge, is just that there's so many of us on the market. So when a position is posted, there's, you know, 1,000 applicants in a couple of hours. And that's not just like the LinkedIn numbers. That's me talking to these people and them saying, yeah, we had 1,000 applicants in a day.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's definitely really challenging. And then I mentioned this before, the only interviews that I've received have, well, actually, I'll take that back and I'll share what else I'm doing that has kind of worked. The majority of the interviews that I have received have all been through referrals. So if you don't know somebody at the company, you're not getting an interview.
That you got to know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody at least in order to be considered.
And so I have been just like begging for people to make an introduction, which I hate doing, but also like that's my network. And most of the people that I'm asking for referrals, I've either placed them in a role or I've staffed their team, or so like I feel like there's some reciprocity now that I can ask.
Yeah, and people want to help. Honestly, they just don't know how. So if you give them a task and something that they can honestly do for you, then it makes them feel good, because when they see that someone is unemployed, the first thing is like, well, what can I do for this person? I can't hire them. I don't know. So But like, don't be ashamed to ask. This goes to my audience, all those hilarious who are still hilariously unemployed, anybody that is impacted by any layoffs or just unemployment, period. Don't be ashamed to ask your network for what it is that you need. If it had not been for my community of amazing people around me, I definitely would not be in this big speaker space being able to do what it is that I do and make a living now. So rely on your folks. They want to help you.
Agreed, agreed. So I would say that's one of the biggest challenges is just volume of recruiters on the market.
Mhm.
Which surprised me because I have 12 years of experience and most recruiters haven't been doing it as long as I have. So I thought at least I'd have that. But
Mhm.
no, it's also allowed companies to be very, very picky. Understandably, I get it. I've been on the other side. Like if you have someone who meets every qualification plus, like the people who just meet every qualification might no longer be considered, right? So for example, I recently had an interview and it was 4 interviews plus a presentation with a couple people.
No.
So about 5 for a month. Yeah, what was it, like 5 weeks? And I didn't get the role. And I really felt good about it. And
Mhm.
what it came down to is they said the the head of talent was like, I actually really wanted to work with you and was trying to figure out if we can make this work. But when we had somebody else, they had global recruiting experience. Well, mine has all been in the US and Canada. So that was a thing that screened me out. And it's like, if I've been doing this for 12 years, I promise you that that little tiny gap can be shored up really quickly.
Yeah.
But that was the thing that made them not move forward with me. So I would say that's another challenge is like just having that volume. They can be very, very, very picky. So I think even really good, strong candidates are being turned down. And then the last thing that another challenge that I'm really running into is just compensation. So 2 years ago, recruiters were actually being compensated more than software engineers
Mhm.
because we're so desperate for them. And now, because there's such an influx of recruiters into the market, they're literally paying senior recruiters. I see postings for senior recruiters for like 70 to 90,000, and that is not what we make. I haven't
Mhm.
made that in almost 10 years. In staffing, I was making more than that.
Mhm.
Um, so it's also how big of a pay cut can I take and still feel compensated for the work that I do?
Absolutely. Now, I want you to provide some advice as a recruiter, although you know the job market is completely saturated and it is hard for even folks like yourself to stand out. If you were talking to candidates right now, what would you tell them to do, or how would you inspire them to think about their job search?
Yes. So I think a couple things. There are times where there's a role where I'm like, it's interesting, but I don't know that I'm like so excited to do everything that I can to get the role. Then maybe you just apply, sure. But for roles, I'm really trying to target my search for companies and roles that feel like a really good fit. So besides just making sure that when I apply, like there is a strong fit, that I could make a compelling conversation and compelling case for hiring me,
Mhm.
I also, this is just personally what I do, little recruiter trick. I reach out to people at the company and not just via LinkedIn trying to connect. I go and find email addresses for like the CEO or the head of talent, and I put together an email about why I would be a good fit for the role and send it to them. It takes some trial and error. Sometimes email addresses bounce back, so then I try another way of getting it. So you always know the domain, right? Like at
Mhm.
linkedin.com because it says it there. That's always what their email address is. And then it's usually like first dot last. If they're a really small startup, it might just be first name. Sometimes it's first initial last name. And so I try a variety of different ways until the email gets delivered.
Y'all
And
heard
I
her.
have
Be a
gotten
stalker, okay? Be a stalker about these jobs.
real estate. Um, and very shortly after I lost my job, the CEO from one of my old companies reached out and he said, don't do what everyone else does. Think like a recruiter to get in front of these people. You are talented and someone is going to be very lucky to have you. And so that made me just be a little bit more tenacious. So I do things like that. And I think I've received 3 or 4 interviews from just doing that.
Wow.
Um, yeah. So that's another thing that I recommend is like connect, even if it is just a LinkedIn message, but more than just, hey, I'm interested, I'd love to talk. Put a couple reasons related to the role why they're compelled to talk to you over someone else. Also, like, keep it short. Don't write a novel. As recruiters, we get bombarded, and especially right now, we don't have time to read all of those messages. So if you make it short and sweet, like that makes it so much more positive for recruiters.
Y'all heard it. Get your stalk on. Make sure you are tracking those folks down. Be tenacious about your job search. Be creative. Be innovative. Um, if there is an employer out here listening right now, could you provide an elevator pitch for them? What would they be getting by hiring you, and why are you the one for the job?
Yeah. Um, so kind of what I'm looking for. I really love the SaaS space,
Hmm.
but really any small to medium sized business that is fast moving. That's really important to me. I love rapid change. I love staying really busy. And so I think a lot of small to medium businesses really provide that. What's unique about me, I think there's a couple things. One is that I have 12 years of full cycle experience. You don't see a lot of recruiters with this much experience.
Hmm.
And I've been in a lot of really varied industries, manufacturing, distribution, banking, and SaaS. And so I think that there's not a lot of positions that I haven't recruited for. I also think that I have a really strong knack for just truly finding and matching the best talent. And I think that's why a lot of my DEI initiatives have worked, is because I say, okay, I want to recruit diverse talent. And not only do I recruit diverse talent, that is the best talent on the market and they are diverse.
Hmm.
So I really do produce results. One of my hiring managers from my previous role told me, like, you made me a better manager. You left me with agonizing decisions and you made me think about how I recruited. And then just like general best practices. And I'm not afraid to push back on managers when I see a problem in a search that will really help, if that will really make it that if we solve for that problem, it will make the search better, faster, and filled with somebody stronger. So I think that's really everything that I bring to the table.
Y'all heard it. We have somebody who is extremely qualified to get those qualified candidates into your doors and fill those positions for you. So, Tabitha, I would like to thank you so much for being a guest on the Hilariously Unemployed podcast. Your support of the podcast just by listening and reaching out and being a guest is not lost on me. I truly appreciate you for being willing to be open and honest and share your story because I know that it will help someone because you've already helped me so very much. To my hilarious, y'all, it has been a week for the big speaker, but I am so excited, of course, that I was able to join you this Friday. Now, the show has not been weekly, and that's because your girl's been booked and busy. Okay, I am hilariously unemployed entrepreneur, hyphen entrepreneur. So, no, I do not have that 9 to 5 that I thought I wanted when I set out for this journey. But I'm doing more work than I've ever done and being paid better than I've ever been paid. So I am pretty and paid, y'all. I said I want y'all to get me pretty and paid, and now I am. But that will not deter my mission. I am still looking to book guests for 2024 who have unique stories and want to share that with my audience. So if you are hilariously unemployed, if you've been fired, if you've been laid off, or just impacted by unemployment, please be sure to reach out to me. You can hit the booking link in my bio to go ahead and fill out the survey or questionnaire so that I can set up time with you to see if you'd be a great fit for the show. I hope that you all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I'm probably going to say less than 10 words this weekend because I've said 9 million all week. So this is the Big Speaker signing out, y'all. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and thank you so much for joining. Bye.